Okay. All right. Probably good to go.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for attending and welcome to the Advisory Committee on Plants and Animals. I am Han Lau, Plant Pest Control Branch Manager at the Hawaii Department of Agriculture and Biosecurity, and I will be chairing this meeting. And Jason, could you inform the committee about the IT portion?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I can go through it. It's fine, Jason. That's
Oh, okay. I was gonna play the video, but you guys, if you have something to say, then the writing, then you can just say it.
Yeah. Let me go through this. Okay. Well, good. So as an attendee, your microphone will be automatically muted during the meeting, unless you're providing testimony. For each agenda item you wish to testify on, please click the raise hand button found on the Zoom screen. Committee staff will individually enable each testifier to unmute their microphone and turn on their camera. When recognized by me, the chair, please unmute your microphone before speaking and mute your microphone after you finish speaking in order to prevent audio feedback. When testifying, you will be asked to identify yourself and the organization, if any, that you represent. Each testifier will be limited to 5 minutes of testimony per agenda item. If you cannot get internet access, you may get audio-only access by calling the Zoom phone number listed at the top of the agenda. Upon dialing the number, you will be prompted to enter the meeting ID, which is also listed at the top of the agenda. After entering the meeting ID, you will be asked to either enter your panelist number or wait to be admitted into the meeting. You will not have a panelist number. So please wait until you are admitted into the meeting. When the chairperson asks for public testimony, you may indicate you want to testify by entering asterisk and then 9 in your phone's keypad. After entering asterisk and then 9, a voice prompt will let you know that the host of the meeting has been notified. When recognized by the chairperson, you may unmute yourself by pressing asterisk and then 6 on your phone. A voice prompt will let you know that you are unmuted. Once you're finished speaking, please enter asterisk and then 6 again to unmute yourself. Okay. Well, in the event that connectivity is lost and attempts to repair the connection exceed 30 minutes, 30, the meeting may be terminated or continue to another date and time. Please consult the webpage for updated information. Okay, testifiers are reminded that for today, there is a 2-minute limit of testimony per agenda item. If there is anyone testifying in the room, please be sure to come up to the mic and identify yourself before you begin. Okay, call to order. So the meeting is called to order at 9:11 a.m. today. Introduction. Roll call. I will take a roll call of the committee members present. When your name is called, please verbally acknowledge your presence and confirm whether or not you are alone in the room. If you are not alone, you will need to identify anyone who is 18 years or older who is also in the room with you. This also serves as a roll call vote. So for each subsequent vote, I will ask if there are any objections or abstentions. If there are none, then the motion will be approved on the same basis as this initial roll call. Okay, Han Lau, PPC Branch Manager present. Greg Takeshima.
Present and alone.
Rob Hoff.
Present, alone.
Maria Hawes, and I believe Maria is absent today. Sam gone, I believe Sam is absent today. Joshua Fisher, I believe he's absent today. Pam Mizuno.
Present and alone.
You. Tom Eisen.
Present, and nobody here but us, Buffalo. Alone.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next item. Request for review and recommendation by the Advisory Committee on Plants and Animals. Public testimony will be heard after each item. As a reminder, please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. 2 minutes to allow all testifiers to participate. Please follow the prior instructions on providing testimony. And may I presentation by staff. So we have Jessica here.
Aloha, Chair, members of the Advisory Committee on Plants and Animals. My name is Jessica Amira. I'm the land vertebrae specialist for the plant quarantine branch. Today, I'm presenting a request to allow the importation and possession of 27 plains bison, an animal on the list of restricted animals Part B by permit for breeding and commercial meat production by Aloha Bison. And 2, update permit conditions for the importation and possession of plains bison for breeding and commercial meat production. The importer, Michael J. Botha of Aloha Bison, is planning to import bison from his ranch in Vaughan, Montana, Big Sky Bison. The scope of the project for Aloha Bison is to inspire a thriving future by raising healthy, naturally nurtured bison in Hawaii through regenerative agriculture practices, revitalizing the land, enriching ecosystems, and nourishing the island communities with ethical, wholesome meat. The primary goal of this project is to introduce a foundation herd of plains bison to the North Shore of Oahu in Hawaii and utilize regenerative agriculture practices to ethically raise bison and produce healthy, nutritious, grass-fed meat for local island communities. This initiative aims to create a sustainable agricultural model that not only supports local ecosystem, but also provides a reliable source of high-quality protein to enhance food security in Hawaii and promote better health among island communities. The facility location will be at G Tree Ranch, owned by the Kelly family, that Aloha Bison will be leasing the land from. The physical address is 67-150 Farrington Highway in Wailua, Hawaii. The tax map keys for the ranch are 6-7-2-40 and 6-7-2-43. Aloha Bison has provided maps and directions, which should be included as attachment 2 for reference. Some of the biosecurity measures provided by Aloha Bison Ranch include equipment to minimize escape, theft, or release of bison, high-strength fencing. Pastures will be enclosed with PQB-approved exterior fences designed to contain bison, which are strong and capable of charging. Electric fencing will be integrated in high-risk areas to deter escapes. Secure holding pens. Heavy-duty steel corrals with reinforced gates are used for veterinary checks, loading, or temporary containment. Pens include water troughs to minimize stress. This ensures the bison are securely contained during handling, reducing escape risk during transport or treatment. Some of the practices and procedures to minimize escape, theft, or release of bison. Staff training. All staff will undergo annual biosecurity training covering proper handling, sanitation protocols, and emergency responses for escapes or disease outbreaks. Training includes DABS, biosecurity guidelines for livestock. Visitor control. Visitors, including suppliers or community members, must first check in at the gated entrance. No unauthorized access to bison pastures will be allowed. Transport protocols. Bison are transported in heavy-duty livestock trailers with secure latches, cleaned and disinfected before and after use. Transport routes avoid populated areas to minimize escape risks in case of accidents. Some of the security features provided by Aloha Bison to minimize theft, vandalism, or damage from natural elements. Perimeter security. The facility location is difficult to access from public areas. The property is surrounded by Cortiva to the north, which has high security fencing and lock gates fronting Farrington Highway. This is the only public road access to the property. Road access from Farrington Highway requires passing through 3 sets of lock gates before arriving at the entry to the property. The ranch has existing barbed wire fence pastures and perimeter fences to further deter unauthorized entry. Motion activated SIM card enabled security cameras and solar powered lighting will be installed at key access points. There will also be aerial drone, which will be used for perimeter fence checks and surveillance along the perimeter. Weather resilient infrastructure. Pasture fencing will be anchored with deep set posts and braces to withstand winds up to 150 miles per hour. The property is naturally sloped from Malka to Makai with drainage systems around the pastures to prevent flooding during heavy rain. Alarm systems. An alert message system is connected to the ranch manager's phone and alert staff to gate breaches or unusual activity detected by cameras. Local police will be on speed dial for rapid response. This request was submitted to the Advisory Committee on Land Vertebrates for their review and recommendations. Their recommendations are as follows. 1, recommend approval or disapproval to allow the importation and possession of 27 plains bison, animal on the list of restricted animals Part B by permit for breeding and commercial meat production by Aloha Bison. 5 of the 6 advisory subcommittee members recommended approval, with 1 member recommending disapproval. And 2, recommend approval or disapproval to update permit conditions for the importation and possession of plains bison for breeding and commercial meat production. 5 members of the advisory subcommittee recommended approval, with 1 committee member recommending disapproval. This concludes my portion of the request. Mr. Botha is present here for any introductions to answer any questions that the members may have.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. So may I have a motion to approve?
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Can I
sorry.
add one more thing? Sorry, we did also get one, we also got 1 email testimony. If you submitted last night, if you want to check your emails, I believe it was emailed to you folks this morning. Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, no. No, okay, so with that, may I have a motion to approve? Before we move on.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Pam. And may I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, is there anyone from the public who wishes to provide testimony? Mr. Would you want to provide a testimony in person?
Sure. I mean, I can just make a quick introduction and tell what we're planning to do.
Okay, come on and identify yourself and then your organization. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Michael Botha with look on the side.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
With Big Sky Bison. So we've been in the bison business in Montana since 2018. We have a 1,200-acre ranch where we raise top quality bison. We consider to be the best genetics in the country, plains bison. And we have a meat business where we produce bison at about 30 months old. We take them to the slaughterhouse to get them processed into meat. We also sell live bison, which are used as foundation herd bison to start new herds for new producers around the country. We have a field harvest program where we typically work with Native American schools. And they come in, we take 100 kids at a time and we perform a traditional field harvest. So I actually kill the bison, but then the elders teach the kids how to take apart the bison, and then they actually take it all the way down to cooking and eating it at the property. And so we have a lot of tours related to that, mostly educational tours with kids to teach them about bison. Then we have a hunting program as well. We do about 50 hunts a year where people typically who would have in the past bought a full bison from us to be field harvested. A lot of people requested after the pandemic if they could participate in actually killing the bison and field dressing it. And that evolved into what we now have as a small hunting operation where people buy a bison from us and we guide them to harvest it and help them process the meat. So we actually live between Montana and Hawaii. We lived in Hawaii for almost 30 years. What we're hoping to do is to have this import permit approved. We've leased up to 1,000 acres on G3 Ranch. Starting will be a much smaller acreage, just big enough for the numbers that we bring over. We hope to bring over a bunch of young bison, probably calves or maybe yearlings, and start a small operation which will ultimately produce beautiful, healthy, naturally raised plains bison in Hawaii to be harvested and consumed in Hawaii.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. And at this point, Jason, is there anyone online in the public who wants to give a testimony?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's Raquel. I'll allow them to talk.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, mahalo. Can you hear me?
Yes, Raquel, could you identify yourself and your organization? Thank you.
I'm by myself. I am currently the vice chair of our North Shore Neighborhood Board, as well as chair of the Water and Land Committee for our community. But I am presenting myself as an individual and neighboring rancher. The presentation sounds amazing. However, there are deep concerns. The area that this is proposed for is surrounded by a large community that went through just recently, as of last week, a significant flooding event. I don't hear anything about emergency plans and how you would contain these. Bison are large animals. They definitely prefer larger, flat land. We've been in this business now, our family, for over 60 years. And I have great concern with the location and the intent of what is going to happen here. I see on the application with a facility to provide beef, which is a great concept, but a lot of cattle ranchers are trying to produce that as well. Are we going to be impacting existing cattle operations that are already struggling to make their mark here and being impacted by a variety of issues throughout our community? And adding those facilities, is that the full intent? You'll need these facilities to make the importation of the bison worth going through all of this, because there will be a process to be able to do that. And we are actually in the process right now of another project within the community that provides or requests facilities similar to what is being asked here and have been challenged very aggressively within our land use and Department of Planning and Permitting. There are obvious concerns with disease control. You know, we had issues on Kauai in the past when there was a storm and they got loose. How do you can't rope these animals. You can't round them up. So there's a lot of critical information, I believe, that is not being addressed or introduced. This community, if those animals were to get out, there's a school, a high school nearby, an elementary school nearby, a full neighborhood. All of the health and safety questions have not been answered, and the intent of what we're doing, as well as the space that I don't believe is adequate for this area. It's not Montana, and I'm sure I would love to go to Montana and see it. It's amazing, but it's just different land, different terrain, and a different environment. So definitely a lot of concerns, and I hope you're able to take that into consideration. I'm happy to continue the conversation, but the concerns are very, very real in this area, especially now after these floodings. Mahalo for the time and appreciate the consideration.
All right, thank you very much, Raquel. Okay. Jason, anyone else online?
Not at this time, Chair.
Okay, sounds good then. So I'm gonna move ahead with committee discussion. Anybody, any committee members who have questions? Please raise your hand. Okay, recognizing Pam. Yes, Pam.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Jonathan, so on Kauai, what kind of issues have there been with the bison, if any? And what kind of, have they had incidents, and how was that handled?
Yeah. Yeah, you can stay there. Like,
Sure.
Yeah.
Question this one.
Oh, sorry. Hi Pam, so on Hawaii, yeah, there was an incident with the bison up there during that historic flood they had, was it 2017? Around 2017. There was a historic flood that the bison, unfortunately went through the ranch. Some of the bison got loose. But since then, we've done site inspections again to ensure that area was secured. But they have also, that ranch has moved to another location on Kauai to prevent that from happening again. So they actually no longer in Honolulu, they're located in Waimea. And we just recently did site inspections for that. So to ensure that the bison or any restricted animals don't escape, we do initial site inspections, but there's always, we can always do follow-ups if there are any concerns that were brought up, whether it's with the permittee or with the public, we can always do a follow-up site inspection. They're not only just for additions or for creating a new space for the restricted animals.
Does that answer your question, Pam?
Yeah, and there were no other incidents or.
Oh, yeah, there was,
Okay.
yeah, there was no other incidents. That was the only incident. And then since then, they were able to improve the area.
Okay. How large is the herd there now?
I don't remember the last count, but they did provide me a count. I don't, about 100, I think, bison that they have
Okay, yeah,
since
that
they
answers.
recently moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna go to Tom first and then to Rob. Okay, Thomas.
Yes, thank you. One question I have is really for the division, for the branch. Why are bison on the restricted list? What is it about them that distinguishes them from, I guess, cattle? So that we're going through this whole process to consider this.
So bison aren't considered necessarily domesticated like cattle, livestock are. And because they still have some of that wild nature, I believe when the lists were first created to put bison on the restricted list was that considerations that they're large animals. They're capable of charging, they can be unpredictable. Any animal is unpredictable, but they can be a little bit more unpredictable than general domestic livestock like cattle, sheep, or goats. So that's what my understanding is of why it's on the restricted list.
Is there anything unique about them that, I guess, maybe harboring parasites or something that could be problematic to other animals, such as cattle, or just to get into the environment?
So, with even though these are treated import-wise differently from each other, they still have the same requirements for disease screening and parasites or pests in general as cattle. So meaning like they'll be different species, but they can share similar diseases. So they will be screened, tested, vaccinated prior to entry into the state, as well as disease monitored throughout the time that they're here, similar to how we're doing with livestock, with cattle, with our animal disease control branch.
Okay, I have a question or a couple questions for the applicant. I mean, I could wait and let other people ask, so I don't.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I'll circle back to you later on. Okay, Rob?
Okay, good morning, Jessica. I'll start with questions for PQ staff. Following up on the Kauai herd, and you said they were moved from the North Shore to, was it Wailua or Waimea?
Waimea.
Waimea. Was that
Yeah.
purely for containment issues due to the flooding, or was there anything that had to do with the health of the animals in that climate?
I believe it's just the area. It was an environmental thing, meaning like it was very wet out there, you know, and with the flooding and whatnot, just to not have that happen again, and for the health of the animals as well. I think it's a combination of both that they moved to Waimea, where it's drier and more upland, you know, so there's no issues with that situation happening again.
I see. Thank you. Next question. If the animals were to escape and the owner was unable to recover them, does DAB have the resources to capture and contain a bison?
We'd probably work with other branches or departments regarding containment if they were to escape. Currently, PQ does not have the current I guess equipment to handle that, so we would probably have to reach out to like the animal disease control branch to assist with containment if they were to escape.
I see. Other parts of DAB.
Yeah.
Okay, got you. One of the next question. Sorry, I have a little list here. One of the subcommittee members in their review mentioned, you know, the risk of invasive plants, grasses being brought in with contamination of the animals via seeds or mud. Will the animals be inspected and cleaned before arrival in Hawaii? And will DAB staff be doing that type of inspection to make sure that no invasive plants arrive with these animals?
So what we have to treat it, I mean, what's going to happen is this is going to be treated similar to how like livestock are brought into the state. So they come into the state, and then they not only get checked by PQ, plant quarantine staff, but they also need to be inspected by the animal disease control branch. So we'll do our initial inspection as well as the animal disease control branch. I know that concern had been brought up. We do inspect livestock containers for any pests and whatnot, especially at the container yard, whether, you know, even empty ones. But I don't think it would be any different from cattle or sheep or goats that are being brought into the state that we aren't necessarily inspecting either. But if there was a concern that was brought up, I mean, we can definitely address it, but it's similar to like other animals that are being brought into the state, whether it's non-domestic or domestic, through livestock containers, through ship, freight or air cargo. We're not inspecting every single domestic animal that's coming in because we don't regulate domestic animals. But that was definitely a concern that I saw brought up, but we can do something to address it if there's a bigger concern for that.
Okay. I mean, the only thing I could think of is that that would be different is that the bison normally have a much thicker coat, I'm guessing, than other livestock animals that would be brought in. But, next question. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let's move on to. I'm gonna come back to you, Rob. So let's move on to Greg. So yes, Greg, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to the lines of questioning from members Pam and Rob, um, you know, the locations, right? The geographic locations of this particular request is similar, right? It's the northeast side, it's the windward side of the island, right? Kauai was originally, I believe, right on the northern side of Kauai. So just taking that into account, and then, right, how similar is this site um, to the Kauai site, right? The original Kauai site. Do you happen to know, Jessica?
And Michael said he can answer. I've never visited that, this site that's being, requested for.
Yeah, Michael, please.
Greg, the Kauai site, the original site down on Honolulu Bay was along the Honolulu River, was in a valley. And there was a low-lying pasture right along the riverbed. So it was almost sea level elevation. And when there was that flood, they were in the same pasture that the river was located in, and they got swept out. So we just went through that massive flood in Wailua, and this property is in Wailua. And the entry to the property, there's 5,000 acres of cortiva, which you have to go through to get to G Tree Ranch. And there was quite a bit of erosion and runoff down there. The location where we're going to pasture the bison is actually on a slope. And I know that woman, Achu, I think the last name was, the lady who testified, mentioned that bison don't like steep slopes. Well, actually they do. They prefer steep slopes because they have a very strong prey sense. They always feel like they're going to be attacked by something, so they like to be on slopes where they can see better. And so the area where the ranch is that we're going to be pasturing them is actually on a slope, which is well drained. There was no runoff that caused any damage. All of the fences are standing. There was no issues up there at all. So we're elevated a few hundred feet above sea level. And there's actually no rivers running through that. So there's just some steep draws that have streams, occasional streams through the bottom, but there was no damage done to the pastures where we're actually going to be leasing.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Tom, back to you again, so you can ask Michael questions.
Yeah, sure. I guess getting back to that property in particular, how large is it? I didn't see any reference to that information in the application.
So the GT Ranch is approximately 1,000 acres. We're not going to be leasing the whole thing because we don't need it. We're only starting a small scale operation. So what we're going to be doing is taking a couple of the flatter sloped areas and running our fence lines up the top of those, and then basically having flat areas up on the very top. So my guess is we're going to be we'll probably start with about 200 acres, probably get up to about 400 acres by the time we finish building our initial pastures. And then we'll see how it goes from there. So that would hold probably 40 bison, I would imagine. And we're not applying to bring that many in to start with. So I think there's the opportunity to expand acreage as our herd grows if it turns out to be something that will work out.
Would that provide for this rotational kind of cropping that you're talking about?
Rotational grazing,
around?
Absolutely, yeah. So like how we operate at our ranch, we have large pastures, 7 large pastures, and then we rotationally graze the bison within those pastures using temporary electric fencing. So all of our bison are electric fence trained in Montana. I'm not sure if we'll use the same type of system here, except that we might use it within pastures. The perimeter fences here in Hawaii will have to be different to accommodate the requirements by the quarantine, which will be a different style fence to contain them. And then usually what we do is we use temporary electric fencing within those fenced pastures to just confine them to a certain area for maybe 2 or 3 days, then move them to the next area for rotational grazing purposes.
Okay. There's been obviously a lot of attention on the flooding that's happened recently in that area, but actually that area has also burned, maybe not that specific area, but there's been some pretty large wildfires in the open terrain up there. And I was wondering what sort of plans you have in case that were to happen.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think the key thing is maintaining the property. The property, it's an absolutely beautiful property in native raw state, is the way I would describe it, where there's a lot of overgrowth. And for us, what we plan to do is cut a lot of that overgrowth down so that we can have grass pasture. So I think that'll make a big difference because it will remove some of the dead trees and the dead limbs that are now just lying on the ground.
But if a fire were to be approaching, would there be a need to evacuate the herd or to move them around or something? Or are you just hoping it didn't get there?
No, I don't think so. Because, like I say, we're going to create pastures which are now pretty much unkept forest in some areas. There are some wide open areas right now, and what I would do is I would confine the bison to those wide open areas that we can easily control. There's a couple of different wells on the property and on the neighboring property that we have access to that would provide a measure of deterrence, I guess, as well as we would have, like in Montana, we have a utility trailer set up with a 2,000-gallon water tank. And during the summer season, when we have fires, we have that thing stocked with water with a trash water pump, and we have our own fire service pretty much.
Okay. And one final question, if I may. What is the basic benefit of bison over cattle? Since apparently bringing bison in is problematic, so what's the point?
Yeah, I'm not in the cattle business. I'm in the bison business out of choice. I prefer the taste of bison meat. That's how I got into this business many, many years ago. Some people can't eat beef and they can eat bison. And so there's a lot of people that prefer bison meat over beef. It's more nutrient dense. I love beef. I'm a meat eater, but I prefer bison because it's more nutrient dense. It has less fat. There's more minerals. It's extremely healthy to eat. And they're just a really cool animal to work around. They're super, super smart. They don't make a lot of noise. They don't stink. Their excretia does not smell anything like cattle. And they're just magnificent animals. And so that's why we got into the business. We thought it would be great to have a small scale operation over here to produce that high quality, high nutrient dense meat, because I think we all know the situation in Hawaii, 80% of all the food is imported. And we only have like a 5-day supply of food. And that was very real because I was one of the houses up there that was without power for 3 days, and we lost everything in our fridge. So it was just the idea of getting into producing a high quality, nutrient dense protein on Oahu. And we are in the bison business. And so we decided to see if we could introduce our bison.
Actually, one last question came to mind. There is slaughtering facilities on Oahu, or that you would bring? I mean, would that happen on site, or would you take the bison to a slaughterhouse?
Yeah, so the slaughtering facilities in Hawaii in general are quite a challenge right now. So we've spoken to, there's 3 different slaughterhouses, one on the Big Island, one in Kauai, and one on Oahu. And we've spoken to them. 2 of them have said Kauai and Oahu remain options for USDA slaughter. On the other side of it, on an entrepreneuring side, I see an opportunity to create a USDA slaughterhouse. And that's something that we're looking at in a totally separate enterprise where we would actually create our own small scale slaughterhouse similar to Maui Nui, the operation in Maui that harvests the axis deer, something similar to that, where it's basically these almost portable units, except it wouldn't be portable, and you can put together a small scale USDA licensed facility, and so that's something we're looking at for the future for sure.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom. So Rob.
Let's see. Going back to Jessica, I'm just curious, when we deal with other applications that are on this list, we often look at, whether the organization is credentialed, like if it were a zoo or something, just to make sure that it's legit. Because I think we can all agree we wouldn't want just anybody bringing in bison, and the applicant has very impressive experience and credentials, but it's all kind of focused in Montana, and the application does kind of fail to recognize the unique conditions and ecosystems in Hawaii. Under the permit conditions, you mentioned that the applicant would have to maintain, I forget which permit condition this is. There are other licenses, permits, and certificates required. I'm just wondering what other sort of requirements, whether it's USDA or other entities, are required by the applicant to raise these animals in Hawaii. Is there any sort of licensing for ranchers that they have to go through just to, verify locally that, it's a legit operation?
I don't, well, for PQ, we don't have any additional licenses that they need to. There might be with other branches, like whether it's through branding, with the animal disease control branch, they have to register their brand. But this specific condition was made if in case in the future any requirements federally were needed or statewide needed, like any licenses, that they have to maintain that. So even though there may not be anything right now, this would be up to the import to make sure that they have it. But if in the future, like federally or statewide, they need some kind of license in order to have the ranch, or to have the bison, then they would need to upkeep those certificates or those licenses. So that we made this future proof. So meaning like if anything happens in the future, we don't have to change the condition. Yeah.
I see. That makes sense. Thanks, Jessica. And I'm just curious, as the Department of Ag and Biosecurity, whether your staff supports or recommends this application. You guys are the entity that interfaces with the agricultural industry, and it's difficult for me to evaluate, a ranch, being, more a forester. So, are you able to take a stance on that?
I think this would be a question for the board. Yeah, our role here is really to, as a committee, decide.
Okay.
But I think, I like to have the board speak for themselves.
But not staff. So staff isn't able to take a position of whether they support the application or not?
I have Jonathan. Yeah.
Just
good morning.
Curious, because that has happened in the past.
Yeah. So as it really, good morning, everyone. Jonathan Ho, Plant Quarantine Branch Manager. So as it relates to a stance, generally speaking, we generally don't do it at the committee meeting, but there's nothing that prohibits us from doing it. And generally, like Chair said, it is done at the board, because part of it is we utilize your folks' recommendation as part of the, recommending approval or disapproval to the board. Based on, I think, what we've seen up to this point, obviously you folks have not weighed in on it. I would say tentatively, looking at the requests or the comments that we've received from the advisory subcommittee, right? None of them are like absolutely against it. They're not, blaring red flags. And obviously, the applicant has, I think acted in good faith, has experience with this particular organism and its ability to be maintained and contained. And the fact that there are others in the state who are appropriately utilizing the organisms. From our standpoint, at this point, it seems like this is something that we would be working toward, I think, approving. obviously depending on what you folks would do as well. But I think from that standpoint, in this initial portion of it, it makes sense that, this is something that the branch is not against, because it makes, it's in line with what other folks have done. And again, we're a regulatory agency, right? We're trying to be equitable as it relates to managing regulatory functions. And then obviously there are, the applicant still does need to complete some other things before obviously everything gets done. I think obviously the site needs to get some fencing and things like that. And there's going to be upgrades that need to occur. And provided that you folks make a recommendation, the board approves it, the permitting administratively can be managed to ensure that say something happens that that the permittee couldn't import the animals until obviously the site is inspected and approved with the fences and all that stuff. So that's kind of where we're at. So I guess it's a little presumptive to some extent, but I think to the extent when you look at everything that we've seen now, I think this is not something that the branch is against.
Mm-hmm. Or other parts of Department of Agriculture that are promoting, food security. I mean, this is in alignment with the department.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then, and again, I think, there was been talk about, disease and stuff like that. And as Jessica had said, right, the state veterinarian is on the advisory subcommittee, right? And obviously they know best about, I think, dealing with, infections and diseases and parasites and all the stuff of these larger animals and those potential concerns for other segments of the livestock industry. So, again, all of that taken into consideration, this is not a 5-alarm fire or anything like that in any way, shape, or form.
Thanks, Jonathan. No, it does. And I think that all of my questions for the applicant were already answered through other questions, but I think the applicant for attending, I think it's really important to have the applicant here and being able to answer questions directly. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rob. So, Brad.
Thank you, Chair. I guess this next question is probably more for Mr. Volta. Again, yeah, thank you for attending, being there in person. My main question is, there's some of that description of the life cycle of the bisons. Is there any information from you or plans for rearing or expansion, of the herd size?
So if I understand your question correctly, you're asking about the life cycle of the bison. Were you wanting me to describe, from calf to basically old age, like that part of it?
No, just if you have plans on expanding the herd size.
Yeah. So let's say we started with 22 heifer calves and 2 bulls, as an example. Once the heifers, and so they haven't had a baby yet, so we call them heifers, not cows. Once they get to 2.5 years old, that'll be the first time that they're going to get bred, usually. The gestation period is about 9 months, so it'll be 3.5 years old. So 3.5 years from the time that we start before we have our first offspring. And what we'd want to do is try and build up the herd to the extent that we can maximize the land that we're leasing. So we'll learn that when we get there, how many bison the land is going to be able to sustain without a lot of supplemental feeding. And so we'll establish that as in the first few years as they grow, and that will determine what the holding capacity is of the land that we have. And so we'd want to maximize the holding capacity, and then at that point start harvesting animals for meat. So the limiting factor for us is how many animals can you have on the land without unnecessary supplements. So we're not a feedlot type business at all. We just like to do pasture raised animals, and so we'll be limited by that. And then any surplus animals will be harvested for meat. So that's where the meat side comes in. Does that answer the question, Greg?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Tom, you can go again.
Yeah, thank you. Another question, a couple actually. I presume the area is overgrown with invasive grasses. Seems to be how a whole lot of the wild, unfarmed areas of the North Shore is. Are these the sort of things that the bison would eat with gusto?
Yeah, so we've noticed, we've observed our bison going from everywhere from forest to, I mean, they'll feed in forest areas, they'll feed in riparian areas along rivers and banks, and actually eat herbaceous plants with hard stems. We've seen them graze on, 2-inch short prairie grass. They pretty much survive because they're so adaptive. They can eat almost anything. And they're also very sensitive to anything that's toxic. You don't have to try and keep bison away from toxic plants. They typically just know not to eat them. We've never had a problem. So it's actually not a lot of grass right now. There's a lot of California grass in the open areas, but a lot of it is just kind of unkept brush, all different types of smaller trees and shrubs that we'll be clearing out and then allowing whatever natural grasses are there, or introduced grasses, I should say, allowing them to replenish themselves and then go from there. We don't plan to plant grasses.
Yeah, the grasses seem to do fine growing on their own. My final question, have you done much community outreach? There seems like there maybe isn't a hugely welcoming attitude in the community, and I'm wondering if you've done anything to handle this.
Yeah, that's interesting that you should bring that up, because that's that other facility that had been brought up by the lady who made a comment was the zip line. And boy, there was a lot of negativity related to that. I live on the North Shore, and everyone was talking about it, and pretty much everyone who I knew that I came across seemed to be opposed to it for a variety of different reasons. The difference with us is that we're actually doing agriculture on agricultural property. We're not doing something like that. We're using the agricultural land for agricultural purposes. And so when it comes to community outreach, everyone who we've spoken to, I would say without exception, has been very positive and very excited and wanted to help. And many people have offered to, work with us if they can in any way possible. So we haven't deliberately gone out and set up community meetings, because it would have been pointless not knowing if we actually are going to be able to get an import permit. So once we get to the point where we know that our permit's pretty secure, I think the next step for us is to go out to the community and actually just tell people what our plans are, get their input, and hopefully get their support.
Thank you.
And just to extend a little bit on what Tom's question, and also this relates to Raquel, who provided her testimony as private concerned citizen. So she was asking about the emergency plan and the fact that there's this neighborhood and schools around, and how, and this is aligned with what Tom was asking about outreach. Are there plans to develop some kind of emergency plan?
Yeah, if they escape, you mean? Something like that. Yeah, so that's a really good point. And I'll be brutally honest with you guys. I'll tell you how we handle a bison that steps out of line. We kill it. So we have a 96% breed back, which is almost unheard of. We have extremely high breed back because we have very, very strict herd management controls at our operations. First, we start with top quality bison that are trained to respect fence. If an animal doesn't respect a fence, it's the first animal to be assigned to the meat side of the business. So we don't tolerate any fence jumpers, any unnecessary aggressive animal. We like them to be bison and act like bison, but if they misbehave, we usually kill them, and we'll put them in our meat business. And so it's very easy to manage bison. Bison have an extremely strong herd instinct. They do not like to be away from each other. So if you had a herd, like let's say of 20 animals, and one of them somehow gets separated, the first thing that animal is going to try and do is try to get back with the herd. It's not going to stop until it gets back with the herd. They have this incredible strong herd instinct. So firstly, the herd sticks together. So you typically don't have stragglers that go off on their own. They're all together. In the worst case scenario, let's say they get out. The solution is to actually shoot them. It takes one shot. You shoot them in the axis bone, which is right beneath the skull, and they're dead on their feet. And so and you can do that with a, low velocity rifle. So that would be my quickest response. If something jumped out and got out and we couldn't get it back straight away, then that's what we'd do. But this is how we do get them back and how we move bison. So we've never had to do that. We've never had to go and kill a bison that jumped our fences. We've had to move bison, and we do that by conditioning them to follow what we call a cake truck. So we get a UTV, like usually it's a diesel UTV, so they can hear the sound of that engine, and they'll learn that when they hear that engine coming, they're going to have cake, which is like a giant dog pellet, which is compressed grass with sometimes alfalfa mixed in it. And we usually give them 2 pounds per day, per head, to condition them to constantly follow the cake truck. So we use the cake truck to move them wherever we want them to go. If we're making a pasture move, we'll start up the cake truck, and we always drive towards them, wait for them to follow us, and then we slowly move along and we drop out these little like dog biscuits behind us, and then they follow us wherever we're going. So that's how we condition them to move. So that'll be the first thing. If something did get out for some reason, we would immediately grab the cake truck, go over to the thing, and try and cake it back to where it needs to be. If that didn't work and was deliberately trying to get away, then a bullet in the head. That's it. Done.
Okay. All right, Greg.
One last thing, and this is more for awareness. You had mentioned that the parcels are if everything goes well, the parcels are approximately 1,000 acres or so, right? The Department of Health does have a requirement, and they're going through that process of getting that program stood up. But the Surface Water Protection Branch actually has a requirement for agricultural operations that are over 1,000 acres to have it's like a water pollution protection plan or something similar to that. So just making you aware that as you expand there will be a few more regulatory hurdles from the Department of Health side.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and perhaps it was confusing what I said. So the ranch we run is 1,200 acres in Montana. The ranch that we're working on, we're going to be leasing starting between 200 and 400 acres in the beginning. And we may not expand beyond that. But that ranch total acreage is around 1,000 acres. But we're not going to be leasing the whole ranch.
Okay, last call. Any more questions from the committee? Okay, no questions. Call for vote. Are there any objections or abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. All right, thank you, everyone. So next item, adjournment. Thank you, committee members and public participants. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And thank you, Pam. And second, Tom. Thank you so much, Tom. And the meeting of the advisory committee on plants and animals is adjourned at 10:06. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, On.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.